All right. Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the Black Menaces podcast. I am Nate, and my other host over here is... What are you laughing at?
I really do.
Because
This nigga Sebastian, my dick gonna hear that shit hella
I
loud.
say you let it go.
Everything from now on is part of the podcast.
I like it. Keep it in.
How
No.
much time do you think I got? I got a full-time job.
Okay, well, we're gonna start from here. Okay, start from the beginning. And you back up. Let's just speak good in the back. She was.
I really gee whiz. Damn.
Not gee whiz.
They hang out fucking
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the Black Menaces podcast. As you can see, we got the ratchet folks in here, Sebastian Stewart.
Yes, sir.
And Miss Kylie Shepherd. And then my wonderful host over there.
Rachel Weaver. Yes.
Yeah, we are super excited to be here. Today, you're going to get to know your Menace family just a little bit better than you did before.
Yes.
All right, so before we start anything off, we got to start with a Menace moment. And since it's Pride Month, we're going to focus on a pillar in the Black history and Black gay history community.
Okay.
Mrs. Marsha P. Johnson, or would it be Miss? I guess we Miss Marsha P. Johnson. Anyway, Marsha P. Johnson was born in 1945 to Malcolm Michaels Jr. and Alberta Claiborne Michaels. Wait, I said that wrong. Hold on. Marsha was born Malcolm Michaels Jr. to Malcolm Michaels Sr. and Alberta Claiborne Michaels.
Okay,
Right?
thank you.
After graduating high school, she enrolled in the United States Navy for a brief stint, but then relocated to New York's Greenwich Village to discover herself. As a transient in New York's Greenwich Village, she turned to prostitution in order to survive, and she made a name for herself as a drag queen with her unique styles and designs and costumes and things like that. And eventually, she went on to tour the world as a drag queen.
Ooh,
During her
period.
discovery phase, she was known as Malcolm and Black Marsha before settling on Marsha P. Johnson. And the P, I thought this was dope. It stands for Pay It No Mind. So
I love that. Yes, sir.
Marsha Pay It No Mind Johnson.
All right, now, Marsha.
All right. She became known as a drag mother, and she helped struggling LGBTQ youth, always putting others before herself, even as she struggled with her own mental health issues. She was on the front lines of the LGBTQ liberation movement in the 1969 Stonewall riots that eventually became known as the first Pride celebration. She was one of the first people to kind of stand up to the police and really kind of instigate the events that started there. After the Stonewall riot, she co-founded the Street Transvestite Action Revolutionaries, also known as STAR, with her friend Sylvia Rivera to help trans youth in New York, California, Chicago, and England, which I thought was interesting.
That's cool.
And then, unfortunately, this doesn't have a happy ending. In 1992, her body was found in the Hudson River,
Wow.
and police, who are good for nothing, ruled it a suicide despite multiple testimonies from friends that she was not suicidal.
Tough.
I'll tell you what, man, it seems like as much as people love to talk about how, the police are there for you or whatnot, it just seems like they don't actually be there for anybody on anything. I mean,
Facts.
I think sometimes it's like the priority of the case, and so she already had so many things going against her,
mhm.
and then it was like, oh, like it's just easier to say it was a suicide.
Right.
Facts.
Right. And we won't get into all of that. That's just that, police. That's a story
Different
for another
problem.
time,
That's a whole nother episode.
Mhm, that's a whole other episode. We'll talk about that eventually. But yeah, so just real quick to introduce our hosts, we just want y'all to introduce yourselves very briefly, and then we'll answer a couple of questions. But do you want to just give like a quick 30-second intro to yourself? Start with you, Kylie.
Yeah, I'm Kylie, part of the Black Menaces. I'm going to be a senior at BYU. I'm Korean. I'm studying psychology in hopes to be a lot of different things. It just depends on what I'm more motivated by, money or, I'm from California, and yeah, just excited to graduate.
I'm Sebastian Stewart Johnson, originally from Dallas, Texas. I'm a poli-sci major, hopes to go to law school, be a politician, Obama 2.0 one day.
Gang.
So, no, you're Sebastian Stewart
I was gonna say
Johnson.
Sebastian Stewart Johnson.
1.0, original, no recreation.
Yes, that's also true. Anyways, that's me. Happy. Yes.
So, Rachel, you want to take us into the first question?
Yes. So I'm going to take us to one of the questions that we got in our email. And if you guys ever want to email us questions that we answer on the podcast, email us at, sorry, I just want to make sure I'm getting it right, blackministpodcast@gmail.com. Yes. So this question, yes, this question says, how would you address someone if they respond saying they agree with the statement, Black Lives Matter, but not the organization itself? And this person said, I find myself in this camp because something I've seen on the BLM website is that they do not support the nuclear family, one mom and one dad. If you would, I think others would love to hear your thoughts. Have a great day. So does anybody want to take that first or give their thoughts or opinions? We can have a little discussion about that comment.
I think in particular when it comes to the nuclear family, right, is, the Black community, we've had to adapt so much. The only reason, we find any times like Black men or Black mothers not with the family, in large part is due to government involvement.
Amen.
We've seen the war on drugs, which was just translated to the war on Black people. And we saw the prison population go from 300,000 in the 70s to 3 million or 2 million. And so really it's attack on Black people, and it was. And so as Black people, we've had to adapt and learn how to grow, especially Black women. They've had to raise a lot of Black people on their own and Black children. I just want to say along as a caveat that Black families are the most likely to have both of their parents involved in like with their children as well. So it's not a stigma that Black children don't have both of their parents involved in their life. It's actually just a false reality because we do.
I think kind of along the same idea of like the nuclear family, besides like just looking very stereotypical family of like a mom and a dad, most kind of, I guess basically what you're saying, that already isolates so many people. So besides getting into families that have two moms or two dads or whatever,
Right.
like as someone who was raised by a single parent, but then my mom was able to get married, so now I have a dad, like it just, the idea of a nuclear family already isolates so many like heterosexual relationships, let alone like same-sex relationships. So it's like, it is just so isolating and so not normal. Like most people don't have nuclear families. And then the idea of like supporting the phrase Black Lives Matter, not the organization, I mean, you can't do that with like many things because they go hand in hand. Like if I say Black Lives Matter and you're like, okay, which one? And you need me to clarify, there's issues in that. So you can't support one without supporting the other.
Amen. I think I totally agree with everything that you both have said. And I think what's really hard is when people say they don't support the nuclear family, I think that's rooted in Christianity and this idea that families need to look a certain way, like what Kylie was saying. And I think that that's a whole separate issue, right? That we're addressing that. What does family really mean? Because there's so many people in our lives that we all consider family that aren't related to us. And so we need to, I think the definition of family is changing and is growing. And I don't think that that's a wrong thing. I think what family means is becoming more encompassing. It's expanding. It's not so divided to brother, sister, mother, father. Like it's just who you love and who you want to be in your life. And what I read on the Black Lives Matter website or whatever statement that people refer to, the statement isn't saying that it doesn't support the nuclear family of a mom and a dad. It's just saying that it supports all family styles, what you were saying, Kylie, all identities that people have, because when Nate highlighted before talking about trans women, in order to say Black Lives Matter, you can't just say, oh, Black Lives Matter when it applies to a straight, cisgender, Black woman or man. Black Lives Matter for queer Black people, for Black people who are transgender. It is encompassing to all those things. And to me, when I read the statement, that's what that meant to me, that it's not just saying one type of Black Lives Matters, but all Black Lives Matter in whatever identity you are a part of. And so I find it frustrating when people say that, because to me, it was just trying to be more inclusive and more encompassing of different people's experiences, not exclusive. I don't know, but based on what I've read and how I've interpreted the statements.
Yeah, everything has pretty much been said. The only thing I would add is that When you look into, I guess, the root of the word conservatism, it's to keep things the same, right? Or to kind of like preserve something that's already there. And so, the only people that have a problem with that phrasing in the Black Lives Matter website are people who are trying to conserve this idea of a man and a woman married with children. And the reality is that just doesn't exist as commonly anymore, because the divorce rate has been 50% for quite some time. So there are a lot of people out there who don't have two parents in the home. There are a lot of people who have two dads. There are a lot of people who have two moms. There are a lot of people who have just a single parent, right? And so that's not. They're trying to conserve an idea in saying that they're against the idea of a man and a woman and two kids, or not two, but 2.5 kids, whatever the average is, right? They're not, Black Lives Matter is not against that idea. They're against the idea that is the only thing that exists.
Yeah.
And I think, when you dive into a lot of conservative mindsets, the root of it is trying to preserve an idea or a belief that just isn't consistent with the way that the world is. And it's not because we're degenerating morally or anything like that. It's just because things change, society changes, capitalism affects a lot of things, politics affect a lot of things, and we can't live in the past. We can't conserve certain ideas and certain ways of being.
Yeah.
Big facts.
And I think the only thing I want to add on that is I just took my capstone class to graduate. One of them was a family sociology class, and we talked about this. Yeah, but we talked a lot about this, just like family and what it means, and how the definition is changing, and how we need to catch up as like a society in terms of like our ideals, but also like policy wise. We can get off into like other things, but like there's a lot of things that need to change to catch up with how the family is changing and what that means. And I think what you were saying, conservatism, they're really trying to conserve the idea of what the air quote original family in the United States was based off of, which was rooted in Christianity. And I think,
which is crazy because Jesus had a stepdaddy.
oh,
Damn.
silence. No, Dr. Mike,
Yo.
seriously.
But I'm
never
just
thought
saying,
about that,
like,
yeah.
and so that's like, this is a complete tangent.
No,
but
go.
it's like, we, like, Christianity is founded on, like, or just like the LDS Church is founded on the family proclamation and having a family and having children and raising children, and we push all of these big things. But unless your children come out of a woman's body, you have a husband, you don't work, you, like, all of these like these things that we are trained to do, anything that doesn't look like that is wrong, which to me is so, like, I want to say a different thing, but it's just so messed up, because it's like there's so many children in the world who don't have families, and so we, like, if you have two moms, all of a sudden that's bad. It's
Right.
like all I see is two women who are taking care of children that
Period.
need to be taken care of.
Right.
And then there's so many families who have that nuclear family and their kids are jacked up and need a ton of
Unhappy.
therapy and are awful, and they're in an awful marriage that is like the only reason why they're not in divorce is because they have kids. So, like, I just don't understand why we push something that's not working
Yeah,
most of the time.
and this is why like policy changes for like family leave and maternity leave, and I say family leave because we need paternity and maternity leave, like for both parents. No matter what the status of the relationship is, like both people should be able to have time home with their newborn child. And so that's part of the reason why there's not a lot of push for change, because it's the deep-seated idea that women should not be working overall, that women should be at home, that why do you need time off? You shouldn't have a job anyway. If you do take time off, like, we are encouraging you to stay at home. We're not creating a way for you to be able to do both. And it's also not encompassing to people who have two dads, because some languages that some works are like the birth giving parents.
Mhm.
What if both parents are fathers and they did not give birth to their newborn child? Now what are they supposed to do? They only get 4 weeks
Right.
off?
Exactly.
That's
Even
crazy.
that, it's like, well, what if I adopted my child?
Yep.
And so I didn't give birth to
Yep.
him, but so that makes him less my child. We can get into those
Yeah.
things.
No,
This whole
yeah.
thing is
Again,
not
it's
so we can
no.
go back into that. But that's a
Amen.
different episode. But yes.
No, it's a
We're
lot.
gonna be back for sure. But to bring it back around really quick to just like the controversy, I guess, surrounding Black Lives Matter, because people say, "Oh, I support the movement, but not the organization." Is, I think it was a Yukite that said, you can't support one without supporting the other. And people, when we asked the question on campus, people were saying, "Oh, well, they've done some stuff financially, that this and that and this. But you know what? Those people also probably voted for Trump. Who, his whole career is a financial lie. Right?
Have you ever looked at like the government or Red Cross or like any other NGO in the world?
Mm-hmm.
They're like mad corrupt.
Right. And so you got to look at what they stand for and what Black Lives Matter stands for, which is the liberation and the freedom of all Black people. In all experiences and all walks of life. I think that's what's important. And so, yes, I will continue to support them. And, financial controversy or any other kind of controversy like that is not really going to dissuade me, especially since, technically we're all still members of a church that we're using.
I was just gonna say that. If you're a member of the Church of Jesus Christ and you want to call out the Black Lives Matter organization for financial questionable purchases or whatever's happening,
right?
Well, you should be headed down to Salt Lake to the church office building and ask them some questions too,
right?
Because there have been questionable things done in any organization. Like you say, humans are flawed and humans are going to make mistakes. So for you to hold this organization, okay, speak on it. Take us to church, somebody.
Right. It's gonna be me, but we can do it.
And for those of you that don't know, the controversy surrounding Black Lives Matter financially is that the founder of Black Lives Matter, they had the Black Lives Matter organization owns a mansion that they use for different events and things like that, and she used that mansion for her son's, I think, 6th birthday party or something, like a birthday party for her son. She used that. And then also she gave a significant amount of money to one of her relatives for security. And it was an exorbitant amount, like a few $100,000. And so, people are saying, oh, she's been misappropriating funds and things like that. And, while that may
Wasn't
be...
the sibling blood? There you go. Back to the people.
Right. No, honestly, if you ask another Black person, they're going to be like, cool, take care of your people.
You wouldn't be mad if that was your money. Huh?
And so, is it ideal? No. Is it something that I necessarily commend? Well, definitely not. However, it's not enough to dissuade me from the overall meaning and message of what Black Lives Matter is trying to accomplish. And I definitely see this as, people trying to use it as a tool to discredit Black Lives Matter and say
absolutely
the movement is no good, which obviously is ridiculous.
Right.
Period. So we'll head to the next question then. Do you want to read it or do you want me to?
Oh, you can read it.
Okay. Our next question, it's kind of long. So, so this said, we all know Black folks are not a monolith and can vary in political ideology. That being said, in regards to the BYU videos, what are your thoughts on political engagement in Utah for pro-Black, pro-LGBTQ, pro-choice communities that are not in Salt Lake City? I'm born and raised in Utah, and basically outside the lake, Salt Lake, the GOP rules the roost. What are your experiences with local elections and by extension candidates in areas such as Provost?
I can talk on this one. I've done a lot with like local elections and stuff, and honestly this question applies to anybody that's in a heavy conservative place. One thing that is super important, one is to always vote, of course. And the reality is, yes, there is going to be it's going to be, if you're in a conservative place, you're probably going to be voting for a conservative person in different ways, in different times. And I think the best that you can do, say a more liberal person will not win and isn't going to win, right? Vote for the best conservative person. Be active in your community, work to persuade people of different opinions. Do what you can to be an activist in your community, to advocate for the people that you are fighting for. Talk to the mayor and to the city council. Work to create legislation in the city council because they do run the whole, legislative body of your city. So honestly, if you're not in a heavy liberal place, vote for who you think would be the best out of the conservative candidates, because please vote, always vote. And then also by yourself, work to make the changes that you want to see. And if there is nobody to run, you can always run too. You don't have to be silent. You can be a city official. Being a city councilman in most cities, especially in small population cities, doesn't require much, maybe 1 day a week. And so if you want to have a voice, be a voice, and figure out a way to construct a platform that would fit in in the location that you live in without compromising your ethics. But be active as much as you can.
Always be active. I think any one person can make a huge difference, right? If you look at what Stacey Abrams did in Georgia,
Right.
I won't say that she
Amen.
single-handedly, but she kind of did.
No, she did.
She was the
She
driving
started
force.
driving
Yeah, she was the
force.
driving
Mhm.
force behind the events that went down in Georgia during the 2020 election, right? Basically, she went out, started a couple years before, because she tried to run
2018.
so she tried to run for governor in Georgia, and because of voting laws and just gerrymandering and all that kind of stuff that went on, she basically was cheated out of her gubernatorial election.
That's a hard word.
It is. I don't like it. I always see governor's race.
She was running for governor, all right? It didn't work out. But it wasn't due to anything. She should have won it, but because of the way that Georgia's laws are set up, it was basically kind of taken away from her. And so in 2018, she went out and she started, what's the word I'm looking for? Registering Black people to vote, mobilizing, that's the word I'm looking for. She started mobilizing Black people to vote, getting them registered. And so when the 2020 election rolled around, all of these Black people that hadn't been registered before went and voted, and they turned the entire state of Georgia blue.
Come on now.
And we're talking about hundreds of thousands of people.
Yeah. And if you look on the electoral map for the state of Georgia, you'll see that all the surrounding, like every part of Georgia is red except for like a couple of hot spots near Atlanta, and then I think maybe like a couple of surrounding counties. But those few counties that she was doing that work in were enough to turn the entire state of Georgia for Joe Biden in the electoral,
which saved us.
Right.
No, it was literally.
Yeah, Donald Trump was very much expecting to win that state, and when he did it, it kind of sent them into a panic, and eventually they lost the election. But one person can make a huge difference.
Absolutely.
I feel like the underlying question here was kind of like, is it worth being politically active in a place that's so far one way? And I mean, the answer is always going to be yes. It's always worth it. You never know what kind of a difference you can make. And you just have to start small.
And one more thing is, there's so many more people like you. You just don't know them, right? Like, something that I found is with Black Ministers, as we started, we found so many more people who are advocates for, Black people or the queer community, like follow the line, right? Than I knew or thought there was beforehand at BYU and just in Utah in general. And so there's so many more people like you, but like Nate was saying, maybe you're the catalyst that mobilizes thousands of people towards a good common goal. And if it is, then that's beautiful, right? But you never know unless you're being active and doing something.
Yeah, and I also want to add that if there aren't local leaders who are standing for what you support and what is important to you, if you vote for them or you are politically active, you can hold these leaders accountable, and you can go in and be like, so you are my elected official. You have a responsibility to do things that are important to me and make noise. Do you know how many videos I've seen of local council? I don't know if they're like, I've seen so many different things around the United States where they're just everyday people going in and going off on their local leaders, holding them accountable, saying, why are you doing this? This is not what the people want. What's going on here? And those things make a big difference. And that can get people out of office. That can get people to actually do what they're supposed to do. And so I think that that's also important to remember, is that you hold these people accountable at the end of the day because they represent you and your needs. And even if you aren't the majority, your needs are still important.
Right.
And finding that community, that what Sebastian and Nate have been talking about, if you have a community with you and saying, hey, there's a group of us here that care about this, there are people under your jurisdiction that you need to care about these things, here we are, and here are our voices. Because a lot of these meetings and things that a lot of political leaders have are open to anyone, and you can go, and there's normally time for you to speak. And so looking that up and finding that is also really important too, and letting them know, we're watching you and what you're doing, and you better act right.
Period.
Amen to that. All right. Well, I think that's
it for us today. We don't have any other questions that we want to answer.
So now we jump into our interviews.
Yes.
All right. So we're gonna start with a little bit of ASMR.
Stop.
Should I like smack into the? I'm dead.
Stop.
Plucking the negative energy.
Okay, take us away, Nate, on the interview portion.
Kylie hates mouth noises.
Unless it's ASMR.
I only like them in ASMR.
Right. That's
If you're in the car with her, though,
Yeah,
you're done.
So
you're getting kicked out of
be
the
I
sure,
have
like,
had personal
DM
experience.
Kylie with just like a video of
Me too.
mouth noises.
Everybody DM her mouth noises.
Please don't. I feel that's mad weird.
What's her Instagram? What's your Instagram?
Kylie,
KY Shep.
Yes, something like that.
I think we're wrong.
Not us both knowing it.
Not y'all both being wrong.
I thought
You
we were
better
No, it's K. It's something.
into the interview.
Okay.
go.
All right,
Yeah,
we're kidding.
interview we go.
Don't send her videos. Though.
K Shepherd 5.
See, I was right. K. Shepherd.
All right.
Why you didn't say that?
Uh-huh.
Anyway, so the question we've got for y'all today as our first official interviewees on the Black Menaces podcast. What events, what stories, what circumstances have brought you to be the menaces that you are today?
This can be anything pre-BYU.
I have two.
Oh, okay. You ready?
These are yes, they're one of my two most influential moments of my life.
Okay. Tell us about them.
One was in high school. I played basketball growing up. I quit because I felt like there was more to life that I needed to do. Right, and I joined student council and debate. So I jumped to nerd pretty quickly, and I was at a student council retreat in Texas. There was like 5,000 students there, and there was a ton of motivational speakers. There was a ton of people who, own nonprofits, were just doing beautiful work. And I don't know what it was, but something at that moment in that metal chair at the very, very back of the conference room, it just inspired me. I literally was sitting there and I wrote one of my goals. I was like, I want to start a nonprofit, which I didn't even know how to do at all. But I was like, bro, they're doing it and I can do it. And something about that moment just inspired me. I just wanted to make changes. I felt like I had a life purpose. And from that exact moment when I was 16 years old, that kind of became my passion of the idea that I wanted to make a change. Whatever it was, wherever it was, I had no idea. I was like, maybe it's going to be like with sexual assault victims, or maybe it's going to be with single mothers, two big things in my life. And I was like, I don't know, but that's something I want to do. Right? Followed up a few more years. This is my second event. It was 2020, right after George Floyd was murdered. I did a vigil, right? And I was super excited. She was there. I was super excited. We didn't know each other. I was super excited because I was like, wow, like I'm doing something, part of what my passion is, making change, right? And there was things about the vigil that didn't go the way I wanted them to, right? There was like,
I remember that.
There was a few things that a few of the speakers said it was just, long story short, it like disappointed me. And it left me with like sadness and disappointment. And I put like my heart and my energy and my mind on the line, right? Just to feel like in essence it failed. And it's weird that that's in a very impactful moment for me, but to me, that was like one of like the biggest, like, I was like, oh my gosh, like I did horrible. But that kind of crafted me to become who I am, of like understanding failure, and that failure is so key to life, and that you will never be successful and really live out your passion until you felt at your passion. And for me, like I worked so hard to try to do something for the Black community and just for people in general, right, to fulfill my passion. And for it to go a little sideways was sad for me. But it helped me understand more about how to plan events or these protests, etc. Who to invite, who not to invite, and basically just that. So those are pretty two big moments in my life.
I love that. I think that's so. I still think back to that summer, and Sebastian and his brother were really out here doing a lot of political organization. That's what I'll say. You're organizing a lot. And I did not know you that well. I like kind of knew you, so I just think it's funny now that we're like, our relationship is the way that it is now, because back then I was like, who is this guy, like, doing all this stuff? And I remember after the vigil, I kind of gave you guys a little.
I remember. That hurt.
I'm sorry.
It was good.
I'm sorry.
All things are necessary, right?
Yeah, I was with my friends, and I remember I gave them a little piece of what I was upset about the vigil, and
right.
it's just funny now. I'm like,
Right.
hey, no, brother.
Right.
But that's good to hear. I didn't know that was so influential to you.
Yeah, it was.
Kylie, do you have anything?
Yeah, actually, I was thinking for a second. I think mine is a little bit later, more towards like my BYU journey, I guess. I think what was like really hard for me just growing up. I've talked about it before, but my mom is a very influential person in my life, and she's always raised me to be very like loud, proud, and aggressive is what I like to call her. But and I think growing up, I was so good at standing up for everybody else, but never standing up for myself. And so I took a lot of microaggressions from people who were friends. I mean, even some family, like people that I cared about. And so for me to say something to them was really hard. So I just never did because in my eyes, I was like, okay, it's not worth upsetting them, even though I would go home and cry or ask God like why I wasn't enough. And so then when I got to BYU and had a lot of interesting experiences my freshman year and was going through a lot of like abuse in a relationship that just like carried on for a really long time and to honestly until my junior year. And so like I think my journey really happened this last year, getting out of the abuse and being silenced for so long and just everything I stood for to really think that like I wasn't worth something. And so then getting out of that and like really trying to refine like my power, I think. And so after like ending that relationship and just realizing that like I am enough and that I can stand up for myself whether it hurts someone or not, because my emotions are so valid that in that moment it's more important than what the other person said. And so I can say like, hey, that hurt my feelings, that's not right, and if you don't like that, you can get out of my life and move on. And so like now like going back to like how my mom raised me into this confident woman who I should be, and so now finding that is kind of like why, I guess to answer the question, like why I am a menace now, where it's like I was set up with all the right tools, it just took me a second to figure out how to use them. And so like yeah, made my mama proud, I guess.
Yeah, I love that, Kylie. And being friends with Kylie and the way that I have and seen her, really, I agree. In this past year, like this past school year, I have seen you like transform in such a positive way. Like you were awesome. Not that you were terrible before or anything. Like she was great. No, she was great. But I really like I have seen Kylie reclaim her like power and her own personal authority and ability to stand up for what she believes in a way that I hadn't seen before. And that's just really cool and powerful to see your friends go through that change and seeing them step into their own more and be like, no, this is how I feel and I'm going to say what's on my mind and how I feel, and my thoughts, my experiences, my feelings are valid and you're not going to tell me that they aren't. And so I've loved seeing that from you and for you. So
thank you. I know it's been hard and a lot of tears shed and still kind of break down from time to time, but I think it really has helped me grow. I mean, the Black Ministry is something that like I would probably have never done on my own. I'm very like not confrontational. Like Sebastian and I were just joking the other day. I was like, he's a frontliner and I'm the girl making the signs in the background. And it's like
we need everyone.
Yeah, and every job is useful. And so now that I'm not a frontliner, maybe like fifth row, but I'm working my way.
The Ella Baker of the Black Ministry.
And so
listen last week, you know.
I know you go back and listen. But yeah, so it's taken it's taken me some time. It's just been a journey, and I think I still am learning things on like trying to educate myself, because honestly I tried to stay out of a lot of any controversial political things because it was just easier that way, with quotes, I guess, easier. And so now I think I am feeling a lot of things at once, like kind of going back to like you mentioning George Floyd, like in all honesty, I didn't look into any of it when it was going on because I knew it was going to hurt, so I just didn't talk about it, and I didn't read anything. And so now kind of going back and really understanding what happened is a lot, and so I'm like feeling a lot of things after everybody else, but it's still I don't know, I wouldn't change it. So.
And I think every Black person in some degree, I mean, if you haven't, that's kind of, I mean, everyone has their own journey, but I feel like a lot of Black people who exist in white spaces at some degree, you have some experience like that, Kylie, where I think you choose to not engage in either that's political things or just racial things because it's easier. It's too heavy. It's like, this is a lot. I know what this means. Like, you've either heard it from your family or you've experienced it personally, and so you choose to remove yourself or just not be involved. And so I don't think you're alone in that, because I've done that to some degree at different points in my life, and I feel like a lot of Black people can relate to that.
Well, it's like just recently, like with the Bravo Coxing and like just going to the classroom and all those things. If you would have asked me like a year ago when this happened, I would have been so far removed from every single one of you. But then like actually being involved in this one, and then like knowing the emotions and feeling the stress was a lot, because I was like, oh my gosh, but then at the same time I was like, now I understand why everybody was like, it takes a toll on your mental health, and there are things that are going on, and so it is a hard balance of like, how much do I let in? But I think what I've learned is like letting it in also helps me cope, and so it's like, I don't know, I like have learned to like build a layer of like thick skin of like, I can let it affect me, but now what am I going to do with that anger?
Yeah, because I think that's the struggle, is like, that's the balance that I feel like we're going to be figuring out for the rest of our life, is if we don't do anything about it. For me personally, that's anguish for me. That's really hard. That's heavy for me. If I choose to sit back and then I feel like, oh, if no one does anything, then what's going to happen? Like, who's going to say something? Like, I feel like this almost responsibility, right? Like, I'm loud, I'm annoying, I don't mind confrontation, and I feel like God blessed me this way for a reason, and I have to stand up for people who don't want to. But then it's like, when I'm over involved, I'm depressed, I'm sad, I get upset, and so I have to pick and choose my battles and really take care of that mental health, like you were talking about, because it's just really hard. And I feel like everyone here can relate to that in some way. And that's the hard part about being a Black person in America, and why we need equity, because these are just things and conversations and stresses certain groups don't have.
It's like we don't talk about it. Like, everybody wants to ask Black people, like, what can I do? How can I do this? What can I do to be better? And it's like, those questions are great, but I don't think what they don't see is the stress that puts on us. Like, when you ask one person, what can I do? It's like, my experience is so much different than every single one of us. Like, Nate has gone through things, Sebastian, Rachel, like, we have all gone through different things. So our answer, and we all have like a generic answer at this point, where it's like, do your research.
No,
I'm dead.
It's like,
Nate, what can I do? You can.
Opens the notes app. Let me read what I wrote last week.
And so, like, I think one of the biggest things is like finding that balance, but also, I guess, in a more genuine answer of like, I'm changing the subject, but anytime any of the listeners want to ask that question again, I think a more genuine answer is just like, understand that we are people, and realizing that you're asking heavy questions that have heavy answers.
Period.
And so if you want to do something, just do it. You know what to do. It's common sense. I mean, how would you feel if anytime you have felt like you were less than or othered in any situation, whether your pants didn't match or your shoe was untied and someone made fun of you, all of those like little experiences, I feel like we all know those feelings. We all have the same feeling, like the list of feelings.
It's the same emotion.
Yeah, that's how I'm
triggered by different things, but it's the same emotion that we all feel.
And so it's like, next time you ask that question, just think like, what would you do if you felt alone? Like, just do it. And even if it's wrong, keep going, because that's all we're doing. Like, we're all just trying to figure life out and figure out how to make it the best for everyone, not just Black people and not just white people, but every single person who's different.
Period.
I'm talking, sorry.
Kylie always preaching facts.
No, she really does. When you hear her going, I'd be like, go.
I know,
go off,
it's
queen.
just in me. It's what I ramble on at night, actually.
No, I love it.
Cool. Let me think. I'm trying to decide whether or not I should ask this question.
Ask it.
Kylie said just do it just a second ago, so.
All right.
If the podcast is too long, so you can listen to it on 1.5 speed. That's what I'd be doing. So that's me with any podcast, but I think it's anxiety. I'm like, this is too slow.
Yeah, they be talking mad slow.
If, who, me?
No, just everybody. No,
especially audiobooks.
No, I listen to them on 1.5
I be speeding up audiobooks.
It was the first
It
day.
said an hour. I said, I can listen to this in 40 minutes.
They lucky that I got 3.0 speed.
Okay, that's too fast.
No, Sebastian's a 2.0.
I am.
Okay, 2.0 is
My
too
brain
fast.
doesn't process anything. I'm like,
2.0 is when I didn't do the homework and I had to do a reading question.
the test was at midnight, and it's 11:30, and you
I live at 2.0.
2.0 and go to sleep. It just like it soaks in, right?
Yeah.
But okay, so this question, I don't know. If I need to, I can cut it out, and maybe we'll just like keep this one exclusively for the Patreon.
Okay.
But a lot of people want to know about where we stand with the church, right? You know, if we're in the church and all this kind of stuff. So I don't know. I feel like we've kind of talked about it a little bit, but if you are comfortable answering the question,
maybe this is for the Patreon.
Yeah.
If you want to really answer for
If you want to
if you want to hear more about this, yeah, that's it. We're gonna make this exclusive.
Yeah,
put this on the Patreon. I can't really put myself out there like
our
that.
diehards, right? So if you want to hear the answer to this question, subscribe to the Patreon. Miss Society.
Crazy.
But for our loyal Patreon listeners, Kylie and Sebastian, where would you say that you stand with the church, and where do you say that you want to end up as far as the church is concerned?
Where do you
see
want a
yourself?
positive?
I'm gonna go Kylie first because I'm saying Kylie first because I know how they feel. I mean, I don't know in depthly. I feel like Sebastian more so because we talked about this on the road trip. That's why. So I'm saying Kylie go first because I know hers is more positive, and also Sebastian is negative. But yeah, I just know he has deep feelings that and I know how because I'm in a similar place. So I'm like Kylie, you go because yours is more positive.
I think my experience is a little different. Just, I didn't serve a mission because of, for members of the church, like my patriarchal blessing was actually like, I could pray about it and then I'd have my answer. So it wasn't clear to me just from reading it. Like I did have to do a lot of like soul searching and whatnot. So I chose not to go. And I felt like that was the best decision. So I think that really does play a part with my relationship later on in life because I didn't have a lot of those struggles. But I think one thing for me, like my whole relationship with the church is a mission. Honestly, I'm the only active member within like my immediate family. And then I've gone with my grandparents since the day I was born. Like I was raised in the church, but my parents had never gone. So, but because of that, my grandma was always super informative about things. Like I knew about blacks in the priesthood. I knew about how the church viewed same-sex marriage. I knew all of like more or less the bad things really early on. And I also always had a choice to go to church. Like I originally started because my mom needed a babysitter on the weekends, and so it was like if Kylie's going to be at grandma and grandpa's, she's going to church. So besides like when I was a baby, when I got to the point to choose, I had a choice. So I chose to be baptized. I get my patriarchal blessing, all of these things. So I think the difference for me now is like because I've always had a choice and the freedom to kind of navigate my relationship with the church, because I've had moments of like, I guess inactivity, if you want to call it. Like I didn't go to church for 3 weeks, so I'm basically inactive, whatever you want to call it. But so
we'll call it less active.
Less active. That's what they say though. They're like 3 weeks.
After 2 weeks, you're inactive.
Yes, and so that's why I'm like, anyway, besides the point.
On the mission, we started calling it a returning member. Thank you very much. Like they're returning. No, we didn't want to use that language anymore.
So I was a returning member. So I've had moments of like hardship and like as I got older and just had like frustrations with growing up in a very predominantly white ward and like comments that were said to me. And so I did have a lot of struggle. But I think my relationship now is kind of where I've always been, and it's, I don't know if I always say it's my spiritual gift because I really have no other way to explain it. It's like
I agree because
it really doesn't make sense to me either. So if it doesn't make sense to y'all, listeners, I'm sorry, but just let it be. It's me. So I am very capable of separating a lot of things. Like I am a strong ally of the LGBTQIA. Is that correct?
IA plus.
Yes, IA plus community. I grew up with a gay uncle who my whole family was super supportive of. So like it was never an issue to be gay in my family or any of that. And then like my dad is black. Everything was so like, okay, like inclusive, like haha, we can still go to church. And so it was navigating those things wasn't hard because I was always raised in a household that was like, you can love the gospel and you can love everybody because that's what the gospel teaches. And so now getting to college, it was hard. Like I definitely was like, why is this so different? So to answer the question, to keep it short, my reason where I'm at with the church, I'm still pretty active. I do have a calling. So like,
shout out to you.
I think my relationship with the church is where I go to church and that's where I feel the most like connection with my Heavenly Father. I've actually gone to a lot of other churches just because I am very curious. I've taken a world religion class. Like, I've read some of the Quran. Like, I have tried a lot of different things. And the Church of Jesus Christ is where I just feel the strongest connection. And so regardless of the reasons behind that, because trust me, I cuss and I don't dress modestly, and I have all my little things that the church might not agree with, but me personally and like the relationship I have with my Savior and God, like I know that they are 100% supportive of the things I do and the things I stand for. And so I just keep pushing, and if I ever have questions, like I'm really quick to pray about them and just ask, because I've always been encouraged to do that. And so sometimes I just don't let things bother me, and if they do bother me, I figure out a way to have all of them. And yeah, I guess I just like very strictly do what the church says of like love everyone, and so I don't have any like caveats to that. So I don't know if that makes sense.
Period. No, that makes sense. Sebastian.
All right. Yeah, there's a million things going through my mind right now. I wish I could I could talk about this for like 30 minutes straight easily.
Me too.
Of just me talking
we got
without
about 2 minutes.
Right, yeah. So I'll try to sum it up pretty
Not
quickly.
2 minutes.
Five.
Yeah, let's try to
I'll
keep
go-
it
I'll go
an hour
quick.
this podcast.
I'll go quick. Long story short, I don't really like church or like the church, right? When I'm currently inactive, I'm only in
Returning member.
I'm not returning, that's the thing.
Oh, that's crazy.
When I graduate BYU, I'll very most likely leave the church. There's a lot of reasons for it. So I have ethical issues with the church that I feel don't allow me to associate myself with it, with how its teachings, its past teachings, but a big and large part how it amplifies and empowers oppressive ideologies in people. I feel like the people that I disagree most with in this country and in the world participate in the LDS Church, and for me that's difficult. I am a very big ally of marginalized communities, and just yesterday a very active member told me that to be trans was a mental illness, and so it's things like that. I know large populations of the LDS Church and how they are, and to me it dissuades me from wanting to associate myself. Plus, I don't believe a lot of the things anymore that it teaches. In addition to that, I was the most unhealthy in my life when I was a member of the church and very active. I was heavily depressed and anxious, and for me, in addition to all the things I said, for me it's not logical, practical, or healthy to be a practicing member of the LDS faith. So I won't be a member after I graduate. That's why. You can't tell anybody this though, because you can't tell. I need my ecclesiastical endorsement. Thanks.
Rachel, should we answer this one, or do you want to just leave it with the?
Let's leave it with them, because we can answer this on another episode. I just think let's give y'all your space, and we'll take up our time on another podcast episode. But yeah, thank you guys for sharing and being transparent, because I think being a Black person in America creates a lot of cognitive dissonance in a lot of situations and spaces that we go into, and the church is not exempt from that. The church, if anything, has created the most cognitive dissonance I've ever experienced in my entire life. And I think to some degree, all of us have expressed that today and through our videos. That's what we're trying to highlight, is that the reality of our experience and what really the church and BYU have tried to structure for us just don't match up. And that's really hard. And I don't think you'll really understand that unless you have an identity that puts you in a place where you feel that exclusion, pretty much. And that's our reality as Black members of a church, or previous members, whatever it may be. And that creates a lot of hard feelings and a lot of nights that we cry, because that's me. And I know people here shed tears about figuring out things. And I think what's hard is when people try to label it as being super simple. And as we hear from both Kylie and Sebastian, it's not. It's very complex.
This actually is a complicated question.
Yes. I need to do research. Like, no, literally, we have to do mental research,
Right.
social research.
Yeah, it's a big decision for everyone. You know, there are people who decide to stay, there are people who decide to go. We all just kind of have to make our own choices, and then just like we do in our videos, we have to respect what people choose, right?
Yep.
You know, because it's different for everybody. So, yeah, I think we'll leave it at that.
Yeah.
That's all we got.
This will be the outro for both. We'll do that. We'll cut this and be the outro for both. The Patreon one and this. Okay. But thank you guys for tuning in today with us with the Black Minutes podcast with our special guests, Kylie Shepherd and Sebastian Stewart Johnson.
Don't ya?
Thank you guys for joining us, and make sure to subscribe to the Patreon for our exclusive content, especially some wonderful conversations that we've had today, and also to email us at the blackminutespodcast@gmail.com with any questions you have.
There's no the though. It's just Black Minutes Podcast.
Okay, sorry, blackminutespodcast@gmail.com.
Get it right.
You're right, yes. And email us with any questions you have. And make sure
Questions,
to-
minutes, moments,
Okay, yes,
experiences.
minutes, moments, too.
Yeah, 'cause we want to share those too. We'll share history ones, but we also want to share your minutes, moments too.
Thank you guys.
Period.
Per.
Everybody say purr on three. It's already everyone. 1, 2, 3.
Per.
Outro music. Fading away. Dope. Stop the recording.
Y'all hit with the hard question at the end for real. I said,
I didn't know if he was gonna do that. Wait, I want to
Yeah,
throw my
I'm
B.
just-
Wait, I want to take a picture for my B reel. Everyone, put your headphones back on.
oh, is Be Real like, is it like people follow you on it?
Yeah.
Uh,
Oh, we're still on the live. We're gonna end the live. Are we- actually, no.
I'm gonna take a video real quick.
Oh, actually, no. Keep it up for my B reel.
I'm dead. I'm gonna put on the Black Minutes.
I know y'all are done with me. Sorry.
it's light, I know it's kind of fire.
Right?
Okay.
Yeah.
Everybody smile. Kylie.
Do it in the camera.
I'm gonna do both. It takes the front and the. I know I was great. Thank you, friend. Okay, 1, 2, 3. Let's see how it looks.
Yeah.
Okay. I love you. I love you. I love you.
Sebastian loves you. Alright. Good stuff. Let's cut this off. I'll just cut out the little part there. Oh, there we go. In stream.
Sorry.
In